Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C. And them good old boys down south, I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, in London, England, as well as Paris, France, of course. You good old boys in Canada, we love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful January the 30th, 2020. Rondo Deportes, Big C, how's it going for you good old boys down south?
Well, Charlton, let the countdown begin. We're less than 48 hours away from Super Bowl 54 in Miami, and anticipation and anxiety is waning here in the South. We are ready for kickoff.
I love when they say, when you land at the Miami International Airport, it says, "Welcome to Miami, bienvenido a Miami." I love Miami, Big C. It's a great place to be. It's very hot. And why do people run around with hardly any clothes on? Don't they know it's wintertime, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, it's called a sweat factor down in Miami. If you're going to sweat, you can use that for keep your body cool when the breeze is blowing off the ocean. Talking about a bunch of beautiful people are down in Miami. Regardless of your body type or whatever, everybody is open-minded and free-spirited, and that's what you want to do when you're having fun.
Yeah, I remember that. I was walking around. There was a movie star, well-known movie star, and obviously people trying to go up to movie stars and say, "Hey, can I get your autograph?" And the security was so busy looking at the women, he said, "Hey, man, what are you doing?" So sometimes just got to be careful when you're walking around in Miami. I love the movie Miami Vice back in the day, but we'll get into that, Big C. I want to say Big C Sports, sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars. Big C Sports is also powered by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our national sponsors. You will hear Welcome to the Show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing, and I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports Podcast. You can also follow Big C Sports Podcast on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. You just got to have the app for that, Big C. So everybody knows something about Super Bowl Sunday. I was talking to a brother of mine, and he was saying that, I believe this is right, but it could be something he heard, like 17,000 people will call in sick on Monday. And some of them, they didn't go to the game, but they had so many libations. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I have to try to figure out what small city you're talking about when you say 17,000.
Yeah.
We're talking closer to 20 million people in America will call out. I mean, and this is one of the reasons why there's been a push to move the Super Bowl to Saturday and make it a Saturday affair. Because when you think about the number of work hours that are lost in America on Monday after the Super Bowl from people calling out, if you make it a Saturday affair, Charlton, everybody can get back to their travel points on Sunday, get back home and go to work on Monday. It would be an economic windfall for businesses if the NFL ever thought along those paths.
If they had thought along those paths, we also want to make sure we take care of our veterans. Speaking about our National Suicide Hotline, we pay homage to them. 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text. That's 838-255. That's 838-255. And hopefully get some help. Big C, why is that so important to you?
Well, Charlton, as America and the world gets ready to celebrate the Super Bowl, and we only celebrate it once a year, Charlton, just like we only celebrate Veterans Day once a year. Think about the thoughts and emphasis that are put on the NFL and even college football around this great country. We need to put that type of thought and emphasis on our war veterans every day, Charlton, those people who are no longer in the military, who need social and mental help, Charlton, and even financial help. And the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number is one of those segues that can hopefully stem the tide of suicide in this great nation that we have, Charlton. But we have to find a way to get all of those great veterans who don't have access to a phone, access to a cell phone or a landline phone on a consistent basis.
Yeah, I really think that's a good service. 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. I think in text 838 838-255. That's 838-255. And I want to just get to your thought again about environments. There's something about the biggest game in the universe, NFL football. That Super Bowl Sunday really is like none other. They have all the media and people get together and fly into Miami and eat up all the food. And some people, they just leave it's a beautiful city, but there's a lot of stained beaches because a lot of suntan lotion is getting into the water somehow. Big C down on the beautiful coast of Florida, south of Florida. But when you think about how did we get here? I mean, the Super Bowl, I see people from young kids that are walking around wearing a Joe Montana jersey, or they're walking around a Christian Okoye or a Tony Gonzalez jersey, Big C, or sometime, from way back in the day, Roman Gabriel, Rosie Greer, just people who have, different things. Of course, you see a lot of Raider paraphernalia no matter where you go, as well as Dallas Cowboys. But there's something about Super Bowl Sunday. It's bigger than World Cup. It's bigger than World Series. It's bigger than NBA Finals. It's bigger than Lord Stanley's Cup. Is it because it all happens on one day? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, it is. When you think about all the other championships around the world, Charlton, they go in 7-game series. The Super Bowl is a one-day event. Winner takes all. And so to be at an event to have that type of magnitude, it's the equivalent of Game 7 of the World Series, Game 7 of the NBA title, Game 7 of the Stanley Cup titles, Charlton. But the Super Bowl brings it all together in once. That's the reason why the NFL season is so much shorter than the rest of the professional season, because it means so much and it's so intense every week of the season, where you don't have guys taking load management, getting rest, and taking a couple of weeks off on the DL, things like that.
Yeah.
The teams give players in those other major sports, Charlton. But as we look at the Super Bowl, and last year I was fortunate enough to meet with the 4 gentlemen out of Los Angeles, Charlton, who have been to every Super Bowl. This will be their 54th Super Bowl they're attending, and that's how big this event is to them. Matter of fact, the NFL gives these 4 gentlemen tickets every year because they had attended all of the Super Bowls, and 5 years ago the NFL decided, we're going to make you honorary members of the club and give you free tickets to each Super Bowl. So that's how the NFL represents itself in its 100th year, is that it is the must-see show in professional sports.
Isn't that amazing how we have so much talk about, sports and the issue around the concussion? I mean, think about what this Super Bowl entails. We've gotten past the issue with concussion. Not that we've gotten past it, but I think a lot more people are conscientious about how to keep players safe. Not that we've gotten past it, but we've gotten past the issue of the knee, trying to bring attention, to social matters that people want to make sure that we can at least address them, try to make them better. I don't even know if we've ever had this issue. I think half of the fans that support NFL football are probably women, Big C. But we got into this thing where we say on every show, there's no excuse for domestic violence. I mean, nobody should, men or women, there's no excuse for it. And I know the NFL, they have this slogan where every now and then after the Ray Rice incident and others that have happened to, they'll have things come out and they'll have people crying and saying, don't do it, don't hit a woman. Through all of that madness, how has it stayed on top, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, the NFL is a horse of its own, and nothing compares to it in America. The NFL is all about violence. It's personifying violence, Charlton. The league has always been about that. That's what football is. Even though they try to regulate some of it out of the game, every play in the NFL is about violence, and a lot of that has rolled off the playing fields, Charlton, into mainstream life. But when you think about the assaults from NFL players, it's less than the average of mainstream society for guys who live in a violent business every day to earn a living.
Yeah.
So as we talk about that, there's really no comparison when you talk about domestic violence in the NFL, because if players in the NFL and any level of football were to be talked about in a violent way, none of them could play. You can't walk the street during your job in the NFL, because you would get arrested for assault.
Yeah, it's just like boxing. There's a lot of people looked at Muhammad Ali as just a terrorizing force in the ring because he could float like a butterfly, he could sting like a bee, and he could rumble, a young man rumble, but he wasn't like that on the outside. He was more loving and put his arm around a lot of people. And so I think football and boxing is a one sport. It's a sport where it's just mano a mano, and you can see the person too. And I would also contend that one of the reasons that football has stayed, one of the top dogs, Big C, if that makes any sense, you really can't see the face of your favorite favorite player. We can see, of course, when they show the introduction of players, but you wear a helmet. You have these big pads on that make you look bigger and stronger and maybe faster. You can see the bulging biceps of players that you see now that you couldn't see back in the day. So you still have a little bit of a theater of the mind. If they were to play the game helmetless, Big C, it may take away some of that dreamy factor that people can dream up in their own mind. Did that make any sense? Because you can't see them, it's more of an intriguing thing, Big C, your thoughts?
I think it's because of the size and the talent of the players, Charlton, the reason why football has always stayed on top. It is the fantasy game. I mean, we see people playing basketball. You can go out and play a pickup basketball game against anybody, Charlton. You can play against college athletes, high school athletes, and every now and again, depending on where you live, you'll play against a pro athlete.
Yeah.
But you can't do that against professional football players, Charlton. I remember years ago when I was working out in a Gold's Gym, and I would always have all these guys that we would call them steroid puppies. Guys talking about, and they're critiquing you as a professional athlete.
Yeah.
Well, his biceps are not that big. His abs are not that tight.
Yeah.
His calves are not that big. And I used to tell guys all the time, hey, they got tryouts all the time.
All the time.
You might be able to lay on your back and bench 560 pounds or whatever. But can you do that on your feet and have some agility?
Yep.
And so I would invite these guys that, you would admire their bodies, but they also admired you as a football player more so. And I dealt with football, basketball, and baseball players throughout my career.
Yeah.
The football players and the basketball players admired being around us, Charlton, as football players, because they knew that was something that they could not do, that they could not walk out on the field, put on a pair of pads, and go through the regiment that we go through, or even play a game that we did. But you can see many football players transition to go and play basketball. They can dunk basketballs also. They can swing a baseball bat.
Yeah.
We saw Kyler Murray being a first-round draft pick at Oakland A's. We saw Bo Jackson play both sports.
Yep.
But you did not see normal baseball players going out there trying to play football. Brian Jordan did it with the Atlanta Falcons and the Atlanta Braves.
Yeah.
But Michael Jordan tried to transcend into baseball. He could not do it, Charlton.
Yeah.
So football players are the most prominent of the athletes other than hockey players, and everybody aspires to be one. It's not a fantasy, it's a reality.
And how you think about football too, and just the celebration around the Super Bowl Sunday, how a lot of cities, they can make all of their budgets happen at least in that month. Just on that one day, it seems, it pumps in billions of dollars, Big C, just for that event with the hotels, and all the restaurants are full. If you look at all the TV revenue that pours over, the contracts alone, and then you look at every owner of an NFL team is also a billionaire. It really is the boys' club of the boys' club. Back in the day, they had the Rat Pack with Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. and them good old boys. They were out doing their thing. But this has become something of a scene. I still recall looking at the Super Bowl. I can't remember the number, but it was actually in Los Angeles. The Redskins and the Dolphins. So the 72 season, I believe it was played in 1973, but for the 72 season. And I saw some movie stars. I saw the most popular one was Michael Douglas. Now, we've had presidents that have always talked about Super Bowls and wanting the winning team to come. But I think that something that makes this game so great is that it's more like a party, and it's not your typical 3-hour game. It's like a 4-hour game, and you have more things surrounding it. So more TV also doesn't hurt, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, if you look at the attendance at a Super Bowl, it takes you 4 NBA championship games in your home city to equal the attendance of a Super Bowl outing, Charlton. And it's all done in one day in that city. So you have everyone in fighting for attention, whether it's in a hotel, whether it's in a restaurant, just to get into the stadium.
Yeah.
That's why the Super Bowl is so big. And everybody wants to be a part of something that's grandiose when you think about life.
Yeah.
To go to a championship game where when you walk out of that game that you're going to be having a team crowned the world champion in that sport, Charlton. You can't go to game 1, game 4, generally of a baseball or hockey or NBA series, and be guaranteed to see the world champion come out of that. They have to sweep the first 3 games.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of this 60 minutes of this football contest, if it doesn't go into overtime, that you're guaranteed of seeing a champion. And everybody wants to be able to see a champion in one sporting event.
Everybody wants to see that. So before we get into a couple of things that I want to ask you about, mainly about cornerbacks and who may have the biggest impact in this Super Bowl from the 49ers and also the Chiefs. When you look at cities that do it right, I remember there is always talk about we don't need a new stadium. We don't need taxpayer money. The 49ers come out of Levi Stadium. That's $1 billion stadium built down in Santa Clara. And then you look at Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City. That's an old stadium, but it's supposed to be the loudest stadium. So the talk about we need a new stadium or we can't compete, well, Kansas City they proved that that's a myth. Big C it's not real, but everybody wants something new. But also, when you looked at the San Francisco 49ers, when they built Levi Stadium, they got a Super Bowl down there with the Carolina Panthers and also the Denver Broncos. Now, in Miami, they played many Super Bowls, and I want to talk about that later, too. But when you think about the ones that you've been to, I've loved San Diego. I loved, of course, the Bay Area. I love going down to Miami. But the ones that I did not think were great, why would they ever put a Super Bowl in Detroit or even Minneapolis? It was just too cold to go outside and do anything. Big C, your thoughts?
It was about building new stadiums, Charlton, and that's one of the things that the NFL has always granted. You build a new facility, you will get a Super Bowl, and that's been in the mantra in the NFL over the last 25 years, Charlton. So teams have gone out and built new super stadiums to attract that, because the Super Bowl basically pays for part of the cost of the city putting on those games, Charlton, because a lot of city revenue are put into these dome stadiums and these superstructures that they build nowadays. So they reward the city's taxpayers, Charlton, in allowing them to recoup some of the money by building these new stadiums. But it's also good for the league. I mean, when you're putting on the biggest show on earth in a one-day event, you want the best facilities to do it in.
Yeah, you really do want that. Now, New England, when they robbed the Raiders and had what's called the tug room with Tom Brady, they got out of the old stadium in Foxborough. They built Gillette Stadium, but they were not awarded or rewarded with the Super Bowl. They can't say it's because it's too cold, because we also had one in New Jersey when the Broncos went and got smoked by the Seattle Seahawks. Why hasn't New England been able to land a Super Bowl? Big C, your thoughts?
Because it's not a facility that's equipped for a Super Bowl, and it is too cold. They got lucky in New York. The reason why New York got that, because they built that huge MetLife Stadium there in New Jersey, and that was part of the deal for them building the new stadium. You got to realize the old Giant Stadium is still bigger than Gillette Stadium. When you think about that, the Kansas City Chiefs have never gotten a Super Bowl. There's going to be several cold belt cities that never get a Super Bowl. You'll never see one in Green Bay. You'll never see one in Chicago. The reason for that is because the temperature is too cold, Charlton, to potentially try to bring a crowd in at that time of the year and be facing 2 feet of snow. Detroit has gotten them twice because Detroit has built 2 dome facilities. Minneapolis has gotten the Super Bowl because it built a new dome stadium over the old dome stadium. You think about some stadiums that are dome that has never had the Super Bowl. Indianapolis has never had the Super Bowl, and they've had 2 dome stadiums. St. Louis never had the Super Bowl, and it had a dome stadium. So it's about the facilities and amenities within the city that allows the NFL to come in and host it. It was held in Atlanta last year. They built that new Mercedes Dome down there, Charlton. But Atlanta is the beltway of the Midwest and South for hosting, events. You think they've had Olympics. They constantly have the NCAA tournament down there in basketball. They've held World Series in Atlanta, and then they've hosted Super Bowls before in the old Georgia Dome and the new Mercedes-Benz Dome.
And they have the busiest airport, I believe, in the world, international travel, Big C. Dallas is also a great place to host Super Bowl. Down at Jerry Jones World, we know they've done a great job hosting games down there. New Orleans, from some people, they say that New Orleans, they've had more fun at Super Bowls just because of maybe the food or the atmosphere, that Creole. Everybody gets the Creole and the gumbo, the Creole flavored personalities and people in the gumbo. But of all of my Super Bowl cities, I haven't seen a good one in Los Angeles yet, but I believe with the new stadium that's being built, that will be erected for the 2020 season, that's going to be off the hook, I believe, because LA has so much to offer. And then Las Vegas is going to be amazing when the Raiders host a Super Bowl there. If you see what they're doing in front of the Bellagio I love staying at the Bellagio when I go to Las Vegas, but they're going to have, for the NFL draft this year, they're actually going to use those ponds in front of the Bellagio, the fountains, Big C, and they're going to have people go out on a boat as they get drafted into the NFL draft. That would be amazing, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you got to look at the NFL and how they look at Super Bowls, Charlton. Super Bowls are an event.
Yeah.
And the Super Bowl being in Miami is because of the legacy of Super Bowls being in Miami.
Yeah.
The Super Bowl and the NFL is all about the experience for the fans. When you think about the game that was in Atlanta last year, all the experiences were right downtown. If you look at all the facilities that surround that dome stadium, everything is right there for the fans to enjoy the experience, Charlton, within walking distance of the stadium. The same as what you have in New Orleans.
Yeah.
You have all of those facilities surrounding the Superdome in New Orleans. And when you had it in San Francisco, you had an Outlander.
Yeah.
You had events going on in San Francisco, and yet the Super Bowl was 25 miles away from where all the events were going on in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So it wasn't accommodating to the fans' overall experience because none of those things involved the stadium. You talk about Los Angeles, and I think the same experience will be in Los Angeles that you had in San Francisco. There are too many auxiliary things to do in cities of that magnitude.
Yeah.
And you see that now with the Rams not always being able to sell out an event. The Super Bowl is its own structure, but will the local people want to attend all the NFL events?
Yeah, and that's a nice. It's just everything's nice about it. Though whether we like the landscape or we like the city, there's something about this event that brings so many people together. And ironically, Big C, I know we talk about race relations. I know Colin Kaepernick took a knee. I know Tommy Smith raised the fist. Muhammad Ali said, "I am the greatest," and we all look for equality. But isn't it amazing in the United States of America that the most galactic event in the sports universe, the most employees are African American? And this goes to the owners of different teams, or even in mainstream America, where African Americans have to try twice as hard to get a job interview with the NFL, twice as hard to get a job interview for a college coaching position. So explain that to me, how we can dominate as a group of people, can dominate a sport that creates billions upon billions upon billions of dollars, and the product that creates billions upon billions upon billions of dollars, when it comes to giving a man a job outside of the athletic field, why is there still a pushback? You would think if you go to any continent on the planet and you have $1 billion entity and you look at the makeup of the people that bring in that $1 billion entity, you would think you would try to recruit them in the workforce the same way you do on the athletic fields. Why not, Big C? Your thoughts?
Because they produce in different levels, Charlton. The NFL is no bit different than any other billion-dollar industry in the world. You know, when you look at the line workers in any industry, Charlton, you don't always see them looking like the guy sitting in the corporate office. When you look at the technology world now, Charlton, the way it exists, you don't see everybody who's a tech geek that are building all these modules and programs, Charlton, looking like the guys who own the company. They recruit from around the world. And they recruit a lot of people, Charlton, from third and second world countries because of their intelligence working in electronics. You look at Silicon Valley and you look at the workers versus the people sitting in the corporate office that are billionaires. They don't look the same. And so you're looking at people who can perpetuate your...
We're going to clear up the lines. We had a little static with the line, Big C, but go right ahead, Big C, your thoughts.
Well, you know, you want guys who can make you money. It's not about them looking like you and giving them positions, Charlton. The players perform on the field. And you know, owners feel comfortable with the people who look like them. I can never reiterate that enough. As long as these sports are being played, they feel that the reason why the teams are as good as that they are is that they have the guys look like them that are cooking the meal. They have the guys that don't look like them bringing in the groceries. And that's the way it's always been. And it's not going to change. As much as you want to talk about the Rooney Rule and fairness in the coaching, whether it's college, whether it's in pro, you look at the college, what do the board of regents look like? What do the athletic directors look like? What does the president of the university look like? And so when they sit down and they have to negotiate and deal with somebody, Charlton, they want to deal with somebody that they're comfortable with.
Yeah.
If you're passing somebody $5 million, do you want to pass that $5 million to somebody who looks like you and that you're comfortable with? Or do you want to pass that $5 million to somebody you got to explain to everybody else about?
Well, someone can give me $5 million. I don't care what they look like, Big C, but I understand there's a history behind the color line and the paperback test. I just hope that over time that we'll solve that, but it may be way beyond my lifetime. I just love the sport. I love the fact that this year it happens to be in Miami. I know we have so much that happened down in the state of Florida. Not too long ago, we were dealing with hurricanes and people that were evacuating South Florida because of the hurricane season. I know there's a little bit of inclement weather, but it's going to be nice on Super Bowl Sunday. So it's always a great place for people to get around and enjoy great festivities for Super Bowl events. Of course, as you mentioned, California has its own appeal too. But even in Miami, just like San Francisco, all the parties are downtown Miami. They're not up in Fort Lauderdale, Big C. So it's like they bought that land because it was cheaper to build a stadium out there, and they moved them out of the heart of downtown Miami. But it seems that a lot of stadiums are always coming back now, at least to the heart of downtown, maybe more for baseball than for football. Why are baseball facilities looking to build downtown arenas? But football, whether you look at Virginia, the Washington Redskins, the San Francisco 49ers down in Levi Stadium, Dallas, they moved out to Arlington, Texas. And then so, Miami's up in Fort Lauderdale. I guess that's just the way things are. Wherever the land is cheaper, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, that land is not cheaper. That land is actually given to those teams. When cities offer you the land for $1, if you build a facility, and they also give you the tax breaks, Charlton. When you think about a football facility, how many days of the year is it used for football games? If you're a local team, Charlton, you got 8 regular season games and 2 preseason games. So 10 days out of the year, those facilities are used for football. So you have to look at what can the city get usage out of.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that many type of events going on in those stadiums, why do you want to utilize all that land mass for something that's going to be used 30 to 100 times in 1 year?
Yeah, and we know, especially for basketball arenas, they go about 300 days out of the year with concerts and other venues too. But Miami's great. It should be a great Super Bowl. The teams, they look evenly matched. Should be a lot of red, Big C, down there in that coral color of blue that they have down there for the Dolphins. We're going to take what's called the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. When we come back, I want to get your thoughts. Since we are in Miami, I want to ask you about the most thrilling Super Bowls in Miami, and then we'll come back. I want to ask you also about defensive backs, how they match up. I want to talk about some more things that have happened in Super Bowls. I really love this time of year. We'll take the Big C pause. We'll be back in just a moment. All right, we are back on the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Spreaker.com. The apps that I really love is called Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. You just got to have a smart TV. People are not offended by saying you got to have a smart TV. It's kind of uppity, though. Don't you think it's uppity, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, that's the wave of televisions nowadays. If you don't have a smart TV, then you're going to be void of a lot of the new apparatuses and the entertainment that you have instant access to.
Yeah, you really do. So being the fact that Bienvenidos of Miami, I love Miami's gorgeous place, Big C. I want to think about and get your thoughts on the most thrilling Super Bowls that have been played in that great city of Miami. And you notice Miami's so diverse. And even the Europeans come here and get a deep, dark tan. So they kind of blend in as if there's some of the native people from around, South Florida. I really love how eclectic it is. It's so beautiful. People have the bright colors, Big C, that you don't see in some of our northern cities. And this atmosphere of this Latin influence, this Caribbean influence with African-American, European, it really is I guess you could say, a potpourri of flavors in that beautiful city. But give me your thoughts on some of the most thrilling Super Bowls in Miami. I want to go back to Super Bowl V. There's the O'Brien, and then the boots Baltimore to a world championship, Big C. I know it was kind of maybe some people thought a boring game, but when you like defense, Baltimore had a great defense that year, Big C. Your thoughts?
Charlton, this was the first Super Bowl that had a defensive player on the losing team become the MVP. Chuck Howley, a Dallas Cowboy linebacker, had 2 interceptions, a touchdown, and a fumble recovery, Charlton, in this game for the Dallas Cowboys. When you think about the Dallas Cowboys in that game, they used 2 different quarterbacks, as well as the Baltimore Colts used 2 quarterbacks.
Yeah.
The Dallas Cowboys used Craig Morton, who started the game, Roger Staubach, who finished it in. Craig moved on from there. The Baltimore Colts started the game with Johnny Unitas, ended up with Earl Morrall. But O'Brien's field goal, Charlton, with less than a minute to go, would catapult the Baltimore Colts to their first Super Bowl victory after losing Super Bowl III to the New York Jets.
Isn't that amazing? And even when you look at the Super Bowls back then, you notice how much media's also changed. Of course, TV with the great theater around television and the sound effects, etc. And we have 20,000 TV cameras nowadays. They look like they had 6 back in the day, Big C. But you notice how even the play-by-play guys. I remember listening to one Super Bowl, and I think I might be wrong, but I think it was Gowdy that did the Super Bowl all by himself. I don't think he had a color analyst or a sideline reporter guy. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, he had the color analyst in the game, but Kirk Dowdy did Super Bowl 5 down in Miami, Charlton, in that game back in the old Orange Bowl, Charlton, which was the second Super Bowl that was hosted in Miami.
Yeah, I thought that was a great Super Bowl, but sometimes the theater of it now can make a boring game more electric just because there's a lot of noise around the stadium that goes on too. I would tell you, when it comes to Miami and seeing some of the great games in Miami, my favorite one, I would say, would be Super Bowl X, the great Lynn Swann and the Pittsburgh Steelers. They had that thrilling victory over the Dallas Cowboys, and there was, against Lynn Swann, he came out of USC, he played at Cerro High School up in San Mateo. He and Tom Brady and Barry Bonds went to the same high school in Northern California. But just to see that event and how he was always an acrobatic player, but I had seen him many, many moons ago at USC. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Lynn Swann had a field day against Mark Washington, the cornerback for the Dallas Cowboys, and he had one of the most polarizing Super Bowls of all time, Charlton. When you think about the acrobatic catches that he made down there, ended up with 188 yards in receiving in that game. But Terry Bradshaw walked away with the MVP as the Pittsburgh Steelers beat up on the Dallas Cowboys that day down in Miami.
Yeah.
He had 318 yards passing, and the Super Bowl champions once again were the Pittsburgh Steelers.
And I wonder now, when you look at Lynn Swann, and Lynn Swann, of course, Hall of Famer, no one can deny how great he was, but he was considered the top receiver, I believe, or at least one of the top 2 receivers. I know Drew Pearson had his things going back in the day, but I would say one of the top 2 receivers. Even on his team, he had Stallworth that was doing his thing too, but imagine him and the size of him compared to some of the athletes of the day, like a Julio Jones. There's no comparison, Big C, but he was still so dynamic that he was a game threat every time he had a chance to catch the ball. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you think about Lynn Swann, he wasn't the most dominating receiver in the league during that era. And if Lynn Swann was playing in today's era of the NFL, he would not make it to the Hall of Fame, Charlton. You think about his career receptions. He only had 632 career receptions throughout his career with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So he doesn't have today's Hall of Fame numbers when you're thinking about players retiring now, Charlton, with over 1,000 receivers. But in the era that he played in, he was a very adequate receiver.
And you think about that team, too. They had Rocky Blyer. I mean, think about how athletes have changed. Maybe some of the Steeler offensive linemen, like Webster, these guys were the quote-unquote, the guys that were the steroid group. I don't know. I never saw them take a needle, but we know they had the concussion and the CTE with Dr. Amalo. So if you looked at the players back then, Lynn Swann, as you say, maybe couldn't even make an all-pro team today, Big C. Terry Bradshaw, could he make an all-pro team? They're going to say yes because he had, 4 Super Bowl championships. But darn near everybody on his team was an all-pro player back then, too. But I would still want to give him, maybe a chance. But I don't know if he would start today. Does that make any sense, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, I think Terry Bradshaw could, Charlton. He has a rocket for an arm, Charlton, and there were many quarterbacks of that era that could play in today's game. You know, I talked about Burt Jones yesterday in our show, and I don't think any quarterback today has a stronger arm than Burt Jones. He can make any throw, and he was highly mobile as well as Terry Bradshaw was mobile. These weren't just pocket passers. These guys had a lot of agility. And during that time early in his career, Terry Bradshaw did a lot of running because he had trouble reading defense.
Yeah, reading defense. But I still thought, had they been fair about it, I thought Gillum, would have been just as good, maybe more athletic. But for some reason, because of different reasons, he wasn't able to crack the starting lineup, even though I think he was 11-1 at one time as a starter. That's why I say they could have won a Super Bowl with Gillum. But because of the way race relations were back in the day, they stuck with Terry Bradshaw. If your backup comes in and goes 11-1, Big C, that's not too bad, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, like we said, it was a sign of the times, Charlton. The NFL was not ready to move on from the number one overall pick in the draft for a guy who was taken in the third round, Charlton. And that was just how things were then. It was about what we had made an investment in to build a team around.
Yeah, to build a team around. And we know things will hopefully change. Just give people opportunity. Another great Super Bowl when you think about down there in Miami, Super Bowl 13. It was, again, the Pittsburgh Steelers defeated the Dallas Cowboys in a battle of the champions of the game, which featured, believe it or not, 15 future Hall of Fame players in that game. Big C, your thoughts?
Yeah, and Charlton, when you talk about electrifying, and these basically became the rivalry of the 70s when you think about the Dallas Cowboys and Pittsburgh Steelers, Charlton. It was almost must-see theater that you knew these teams would eventually meet in the Super Bowl, and they did it on multiple occasions, Charlton, and all of them were dramatic, where the Pittsburgh Steelers came out victorious 3 times against the Dallas Cowboys, Charlton. But nevertheless, when you talk about the 15 Hall of Famers in this game, and this game was decided, Charlton, when Randy White tried to return a kickoff and he fumbled the ball, Charlton, and Dirt Whiston, a backup linebacker for the Pittsburgh Steelers, recovered that fumble, and Bradshaw was able to take it into the end zone for a game-clinching touchdown.
When you think about that and how we talk about how many great players, and of course every generation has its own stories. Everybody gets bigger, stronger, and faster after they retire. Just like someone caught a 2-foot-long catfish, 20 years later that catfish was 15 feet long, Big C. So we know that people embellish. Could Franco Harris, when you think about the big, strong, fast running back out of Penn State, but fast back in those days, he would not be fast considered how guys are fast today. When you think about how people can run a 40 and a 4.3 now, I don't know if Franco ran a 40 and 4.6, but he seemed like he was running a 4.6, maybe 4.7. He wouldn't get on the field today with today's athletes. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I think running backs of all eras have a chance, Charlton. It depends on the scheme that you play in the team that you're on, what you fit in. When you think about Franco Harris, Charlton, he wasn't even the best running back on his college team.
Yeah.
Lydell Mitchell was the best running back on his college football team at Penn State. Lydell Mitchell went in the first round to the Baltimore Colts, and he played with Burt Jones, as I talked about earlier, and Franco Harris ended up at Pittsburgh playing along with Terry Bradshaw.
Yeah.
But when you think about how the 2 careers went, Franco has 4 Super Bowl rings. Lydell did not get a sniff at 1. And
you talk about in that game, 15 future Hall of Fame players in that one game. That's amazing. We consider there's only 22 guys that play, at a time on offense or defense, Big C. But I mean, everybody has their own opinion about how great players are, but that was clearly one of the most talented Super Bowls. I also want to go to the Super Bowl 23 called The Drive, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, this is the game that was infamous with the Cincinnati Bengals and the San Francisco 49ers, where Cincinnati took the lead late in the game, Charlton, and San Francisco and Joe Montana marched onto the field. You got John Taylor and you got Jerry Rice. Everyone knows that you're going to go to Jerry Rice every opportunity. Roger Craig played a pivotal role, Charlton, in that final drive. But when it came down to crunch time and everyone thought that the ball would be going to Jerry Rice, Joe Montana hit John Taylor over the middle, Charlton, and robbed Cincinnati for the second time facing the 49ers from the grasp of a Super Bowl victory.
And I remember that game down in Miami. I didn't think it was that exciting until that final fourth quarter. And we know last drives tend to do that. You always felt that Montana, when he had Rice, and he had so many great players that played on that football team, from Craig Big C. The offensive line was solid too. But again, as you mentioned, Jonathan Taylor, he's the one who caught the winning pass. And that almost didn't happen, because right before that play, Joe Montana was almost picked off in the end zone too. That would have really changed history and how great this 49er franchise has been over the years. But it was a great game down in Miami. I know, and I wonder if the heat and humidity has ever been a factor, especially for teams that come from a cold weather climate. Have you ever noticed that, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, it doesn't make a factor on a team. You think you got 2 weeks prior to the Super Bowl, so when you're going to spend a week in your Super Bowl town, regardless of where you come from. So you're going to be acclimated to where you are, and that's the reason why the NFL brings the teams in a week before the game,
yeah,
so that they can get climatized to the city that they're living in.
Yeah, well, I just love the festivity around the stadium. Also, this is the same stadium that's now called Hard Rock Stadium. It used to be called Joe Robbie Stadium back in the day. And they reconfigured, they remodeled that stadium. They put $500 million into a remodel of the stadium. It's not a completely enclosed stadium. You can look up and see the blue sky, but they have made it more appealing and more football friendly without having to tear it down and build something new. So I really appreciate how they put money into South Florida and made it a place that's more fan friendly. So everybody has their favorite thoughts, Big C, of Super Bowls. But I would also say, even though it was not a Super Bowl, I would say one of the better games that I saw happened also in South Florida at the old Orange Bowl. It was Kellen Winslow when he went down there with Dan Fouts, and they played a game against Miami. It was a playoff game, and I thought Kellen Winslow played one of the greatest games I've ever seen from a tight end. So that Orange Bowl has hosted a lot of great events. It hosted the University of Miami. I think they had a 58-game home winning streak for their football team. That was snapped by the University of Washington and the great Napoleon Kaufman actually back in the day. And I thought that stadium has seen some of the better athletes, whether it's college or professional. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, it's been a host of many great football games, Charlton, over the decades. It was one of those historical sites, Charlton, but eventually everything's time come to an end, and they demolished it a decade ago to build the Marlins' new stadium downtown.
Yeah, they've always put money where people show up. And so I really appreciate just being able to talk about some of the great Super Bowls, different locations throughout the country. I'm sure the people in Green Bay would love to see one for the sake of it, but no one wants to sit in 5-degree weather on a Super Bowl Sunday. Do you ever think, and the answer probably is no, that we would ever see a Super Bowl in Mexico City or in London, because the NFL plays in both sites? Big C, your thoughts?
They play there, Charlton, but those are basically like exhibition games. That'd be like saying you're going to take an NBA champion and play the game down in Mexico,
yeah,
Charlton, and take it away from the cities that support them.
Yeah, that's true. I know we have the NBA Finals in Toronto, but they are part of the National Basketball League. I want to get into your thoughts about defense. And I miss the days of Stickum, just talking about the Raiders and talking about the Dolphins and the Sea of Hands that they played out in Oakland. And it was Stickum that helped the Raiders hold on to so many passes back in the day, whether it was Cliff Branch or Fred Biletnikoff, Big C. I wonder how Kenny the Snake Stabler had such a pretty spiral when he had Stickum on the balls. I know they couldn't wipe off all the Stickum. They were always getting new balls in for Kenny the Snake Stabler, but I love the games they used to have with Miami. But when it comes to the 49ers and the Kansas City Chiefs, everybody has their opinion about who's going to be the best player, who's the big impact player, what player cannot afford to have a bad game. I don't think anyone can afford to have a bad game, but when it comes to the cornerbacks, who will have the biggest impact in the Super Bowl? I want to get your thoughts. San Francisco 49ers, Emmanuel Mosley, and Richard Sherman. I wouldn't mess with Sherman, even though I know they're going to try on Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I think, from what I've seen with the 49ers, that Mosley is their best cornerback. Sherman will be challenged, Charlton. I don't think that he can run with Tyreek Hill. When you're talking about receivers with world-class speed, that's something that the 49ers haven't faced a lot of during the regular season. When you look at the receivers in their conference, Charlton, you don't see a lot of world-class burners in the NFC West. I mean, Seattle doesn't possess them, the Rams doesn't possess them, and neither does Arizona. A lot of possession receivers. Now you're going to have to get on your horse and do some giddy-up to chase these guys down the field. So Mosley has proven himself in the playoffs and throughout the season, Charlton. And Sherman has lived a lot on his laurels, but he's never faced the Kansas City Chiefs like what they have now, that track team.
And I believe this will be Sherman's 14th playoff game, in Super Bowls combined with Seattle and San Francisco, and he's yet to give up a touchdown. That may change on Sunday, but I don't think they can get him twice. They might get him once. We know that it was Aaron Rodgers went over the top on him one time and had a chance with Devontae Adams, Big C. But I think the 49ers are pretty savvy in protecting Sherman too. But this is going to be a time when he's on that island by himself, and I can't wait to see the matchups. It's just, I'm so excited about this Super Bowl, much more than I was about last year's Super Bowl. When I go to the other side of the line of scrimmage, Big C, Kansas City Chiefs, you have Richard Breland and Charvarius Ward. They're more known for their offense. They have a pretty solid defense too. But everyone knows they come second fiddle to the great Patrick Mahomes on offense. But give me your feeling about their DBs. How will they hold up against the 49ers? And you know they have running backs that get a lot of yards after catch. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you think about Breland and Ward in Kansas City, Charlton, you have two very physical cornerbacks, something you didn't see in the game with Green Bay where you had defensive backs that were kind of scared to tackle. These guys bring the wood because they're used to playing against receivers that are all out on the field. And in the AFC, they've had to play against some outstanding running backs where they've been forced to come up and tackle, Charlton, so they haven't shied away from it. And that's what 49ers haven't faced in their two playoff games, Charlton, is defensive backs who are willing to come up and lay the wood. It's going to be a different story with the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It just seems like this is about in Super Bowl weekend. Everybody's happy about the game. Players may never get back there. Imagine, talking about Miami, Dan Marino never got back to another Super Bowl. And people thought that he would have a career kind of like Joe Montana, but it never happened to him again. Look at Andy Reid. If he has a chance to get this one done, at least he has a Super Bowl victory under his hat. But we know they have a lot to do about that on defense with the 49ers. And when you think about their defensive backs, I want to get your thoughts on these two players that everybody makes it about a quarterback. Sometime I remember Trent Dilfer, he didn't throw the ball a lot, but he was in the Super Bowl with the Baltimore Ravens. And everybody has this thought that the quarterback that plays best will win. But the 49ers, if you look at the quarterback salary comparison in the Super Bowl, you know, Jimmy G makes a lot of money. Mahomes is going to pass him coming up on his next negotiation. But I want to get your feeling of, does it really matter right now, your thoughts?
No, it really doesn't matter. And you just brought up Trent Dilfer. And Jimmy G got to the Super Bowl much like Trent Dilfer did. A lot of people do not remember that Trent Dilfer only passed the ball 7 times when the Baltimore Ravens beat the Oakland Raiders to get to the Super Bowl, Charlton, when they beat the New York Giants.
Yeah.
That's similar numbers to what Jimmy Garoppolo had to get to the Super Bowl to play the Kansas City Chiefs coming Sunday, Charlton. So when you think about numbers, paychecks really don't matter when it comes to a quarterback, even though Jimmy G makes some $25 million this year as a quarterback of the actually $27 million as a quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers. And Patrick Mahomes makes a mere $5 million as a quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs. But everyone knows he's the most dynamic, threatening quarterback in the NFL. If there was a draft held today, next year, next month, Charlton, everybody would take Patrick Mahomes number 1 overall and trade up to do that.
Yeah. When you talk about how people perceive players, I don't know what it is about Jimmy G that makes people want to rank him up there with the guys like a Joe Montana or a Steve Young or even Colin Kaepernick. They always say, well, that he is 22-5. He's not 22-5. The 49ers are 22-5. He just happened to be at the quarterback. But you can't knock it just like Trent Dilfer. He wasn't the reason that the Baltimore Ravens won the Super Bowl over the New York Giants. But if you're part of a team, it's a team game. But we know they want to make the quarterback the paragon of virtue for the NFL. I still wish both players, nothing but the best. When you think about both Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers, they played 2 playoff games. Now, there's some debate as to what team had the most convincing wins in the playoff. The 49ers kind of ran away from Minnesota, and they ran away from Green Bay. And then if you look at Kansas City, they fell behind Houston, and they also fell behind Tennessee. But they showed out when they shifted into second gear, Big C. They ran away with those games. Which one had the tougher path? Your thoughts?
Well, if you look at these two games, Charlton, and you're trying to compare these teams across the board, the Kansas City Chiefs averaged 11 points more a game during the playoffs than what the San Francisco 49ers did. And so when you think about an offense, quick strike, big scoring ability, Charlton, big playability, you like what the Kansas City Chiefs can do. What the 49ers bring to this game, Charlton, are two running backs that have scored 4 touchdowns each. When you think about Tevin Coleman in their first-round game against the Minnesota Vikings, rushed for over 100 yards and scored 4 touchdowns, Charlton.
Yeah.
Then you get to Raheem Mostert in their second game against the Green Bay Packers, Charlton, rushed for over 200 yards and scored 4 touchdowns. So what the San Francisco 49ers have done, Charlton, is that they've done it by committee. But on the flip side, Patrick Mahomes has equaled that touchdown total of those two running backs for the San Francisco 49ers, where he has thrown 8 touchdown passes in the 2 victories for the Kansas City Chiefs, and probably could have thrown more, but they held it off just a little bit. So when we look at big strike capability, the Kansas City Chiefs has it.
Yeah.
If you want to ground it out, you're looking at the San Francisco 49ers. But can they push that Kansas City Chiefs defensive line around, which when we saw the Tennessee Titans, they were unable to do, and they were the most dominant running team in the NFL.
Yeah, they had that one-headed monster, but I think the 49ers, their dynamic running backs can be a problem. I mean, the Chiefs, they may fall behind in this game, but they're the kind of team that can come from behind, even if they're down by 10 points. If the Niners fall down by 10 points, I don't think they're going to come back. I think their best bet is to make it a run-heavy game and control the clock. That's what a lot of teams do when they don't have a strong passing game. I know the media wants to see Jimmy G have a big passing game, but if he's throwing the ball 20 times, they're probably going to lose this game. If he's throwing under 20, they'll have a stronger chance to win. Kansas City, as you mentioned, averaged 43 points a game on offense. The 49ers averaged 32 points a game on offense. It's going to come down to a possession game, and the team that holds onto the ball best most likely will have the advantage in this game. So I know everybody loves that. Give me your thoughts on two of the youngest coaches, the youngest minds, the best young minds in coaching, and they'll be facing each other in this Super Bowl. Big C, your thoughts?
You know, two of the young minority minds in coaching, Charlton, when you talk about hot coaching possibilities for jobs in the NFL, you think about Salas, the defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers, and you think about Bienvenidos, the offensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah.
These two men, Charlton, will determine the outcome of Super Bowl 54 in Miami. Yet neither one of them could get any serious consideration for a head coaching job. They talk about the Rooney Rule. You had a Hispanic defensive coordinator. You have an African-American offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
And neither one of them will get the spotlight in the game because it's going to be about Shanahan and it's going to be about Reed. But these are the two most determining factors on the sideline.
Yeah, I love the fact that they're getting the opportunity, at least as coordinators, and that's a start. But you got to talk about it so people know that there is a discrepancy. Super Bowl 53 featured the lowest scoring Super Bowl, Big C, of all time, with the Patriots and the Rams, and no one thought that was going to be the case. I remember the Rams, they had put up 50 points in the game at the Coliseum against Kansas City, and then to go into the Super Bowl and score 3 points doesn't make any sense. What's on slate for Super Bowl 54, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, you know, Super Bowl 54, Charlton, you hope that it's going to be a dynamic Super Bowl. This is one of those games that everybody has reveled about for weeks. What will happen? We talked about the 49ers' great defense as well as their dominant running game. We look at the Kansas City Chiefs and their dynamic offense and their much improved defense throughout the 2019 season. People have this game on the boards as a 1.5, 2-point game, Charlton. I don't see it. I see it as a 2-touchdown game as far as the difference in this game, Charlton. And I don't see the team going in trailing at halftime having a shot to win this game.
Yeah, I think it's going to be at least 7 points. I don't see it being that 1 point. That's like fool's gold, but we know there's a lot of prop bets out there too. So in this game, everybody has their own opinion. Will it top the excitement of one of the more competitive Super Bowls of all time? And everybody has their opinion, but it on paper, it has potential, Big C. It just has a lot of potential to do that. Your thoughts?
Well, when we think about the most competitive, interesting Super Bowl of all time, Charlton, when you talked about that Super Bowl down in Arizona, between the Seattle Seahawks and the New England Patriots. It came down basically to the last play of the game where Malcolm Butler picked off Russell Wilson in the end zone for that game-clinching touchdown, Charlton, when Seattle had an opportunity for back-to-back Super Bowl victory. So if we can get anything in that excitement realm, Charlton, I think it will be outstanding for the fans, but I don't see it being as close as to the last drive of the game.
I hope that we have that kind of a game where you just sit on the edge of your seat, because last year we didn't have that. People can get up and walk away from the TV. It just didn't have, it was a thud, Big C, like a fireworks that don't go off. We want to see fireworks this year, and I think we'll get them. It's just a matter of time. You know, if both teams can play their best, it may come down to the last possession. But I still feel in my gut there's going to be a touchdown, you know, not 1 point that decides this game. But who knows? Everybody has their own hopes, and we hope that we can definitely enjoy Super Bowl 54. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Speaker.com. The apps that I really love are by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear Welcome to the Show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, and Fire TV, as well as a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. And no offense to teams or TVs that are not called smart. Looking forward to a great Super Bowl 54 in Miami. I want to close out today's show, Big C, with the NBA action. I know a lot of people are still mourning the loss of Kobe Bryant, his beautiful daughter, and the other beautiful family that were lost in the tragic helicopter crash in Southern California. I just wish that they would have had every type of safety device on that helicopter saying, pull up, you're flying too low, especially when the CHP grounded all their helicopters. Why was that helicopter flying in the first place? Today's NBA action: Toronto Raptors at the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Charlotte Hornets at the Washington Wizards, Philadelphia 76ers at the Atlanta Hawks, Golden State Warriors over in Beantown playing at the Boston Celtics, the Sacramento Kings down south in LA at Staples Center taking on the LA Clippers. Should be a very emotional game, you know, tomorrow night when the Lakers come back and they play the Portland Trail Blazers, and then the New Orleans Jazz taking on the Denver Nuggets. I just hope and pray that everybody learns to just appreciate life. And as much as I'm finding out more about Kobe, he did a lot of stuff behind the scenes that nobody knows about, going to hospitals, you know, signing autographs for kids that were dealing with issues, and he didn't ask the cameras to show up. You rarely even knew about that. He was always a tireless worker, someone that came from high school to dominate the NBA for 20 years, an 18-time All-Star, and 20 years. Everybody has a little mamba in them when they want to drive real hard. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you know, as I think about Kobe, and I know a lot has been said about him, Charlton, but people only recognize Kobe as an athlete, how big, how strong, how fast he was. And I don't think any of those things mattered in the morning when he was in the kitchen making pancakes for his kids, or packing the lunch, or driving them to school. And that's what I think about Kobe, not as an athlete. I think about Kobe as a dad, and the families that are broken, Charlton, behind this horrific accident that happened this past week. And that's what I think of. I don't think about his career and what he did, Charlton. I think about the life that he was leading, because he was no longer an athlete.
Yeah, just a good life is not how long you live, it's how you live. And I still thoughts and prayers are with his family and all the other families affected by that tragedy. And I know a lot of NBA players, especially going into LA tomorrow for the Lakers and the Portland Trail Blazers. I don't know what kind of celebration they're going to do, but it definitely will be, you know, must-see TV for me, because I've been a Laker. I mean, I love all teams, but I've really been a Laker fan from back in the days of Kareem and Showtime and Inglewood and James Worthy and Byron Scott, and watching all those great players. James Worthy, I mean, to me, I've always been a Laker guy, even though I love Golden State too. Those are my two favorite teams, but everybody has their own choice. Big C, back in the day, there's a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, With all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young man, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, Charlton, we're about 50 hours away from all the hype being over, where we'll be crowning a new Super Bowl champion down in Miami, Charlton. Will we see a two-time winning organization in the Kansas City Chiefs, or will we see the San Francisco 49ers tie for the all-time lead in Super Bowl victories with the New England Patriots and the Pittsburgh Steelers at 6?
Well, Bienvenidos of Miami. We love Miami. Maybe you can love it too every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, there's never, ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.